Is there something holding you back? Something that nobody else knows that you can't speak about? When I was 13, I knew that my childhood was over. I had this friend at school who was so cool, everything that I wasn't, and when she suggested a night out, I jumped at the chance. Now, her mum was away, and we both lied about where we were staying, and somehow we managed to buy, of all things, a bottle of vodka, which we took to a local cafe in North London, which might sound pretty sophisticated, but it wasn't. It was pretty scuzzy. Now, I was just this skinny 13-year-old girl who had never drunk before, and unsurprisingly, the drink went straight to my head. Soon I was chucking up everywhere, and we were kicked out. 2 of the young men from our table left at the same time, and they put us in a taxi to take us back to my friend's mum's empty flat. When we arrived at the building, I was literally legless, and the 2 of them bumped me up 4 flights of stairs, just like a sack of potatoes. When we got into the flat, they separated us straight away, putting us into different rooms, and I really thought that they were there to take me out of the clothes I'd been sick in, put me in the bed, and let me sleep off the alcohol. But it became very clear, very quickly, that they were there for something else. It's very odd what takes place in your mind when you're being raped by 2 men. I could hear a barbecue down in the communal gardens, and I'm lying there whilst these men are violating my body, wondering, I wonder what they're eating, chicken or beef? Burgers or kebab, basically refusing to connect with the scene of the crime, my body. And when my attention came back into the room, I noticed that there was a wallpaper border running around the top of the walls made out of pink and gray bows. And I counted those bows over and over and over again. There were 44 in total, and it is a number that follows me everywhere still to this day. But after a while, the violence escalated and the counting didn't help anymore. And I literally left my body, which was so surreal because here I am on the floor, tied by a wrist and an ankle to the pipes of the radiator, and here I also am, sitting on top of the wardrobe, watching the scene down below. Near to the end, the worst one, as he picks up his knife and holds it to my throat, says to me, "If you tell anyone, we will find you and we will kill you." And I believed him. And then they put me back in the bed and left. In the morning, I could hear this jingly-jangly sound, and I thought they were the keys in the door. I thought they're coming to finish me off. But the sound actually came from the bracelets on my friend's wrist. She was now in the bed next to me. She was still dressed. I was now naked. She hadn't been touched at all. I had injuries on my body, but no idea how I had got them. There was traces of blood, semen, and excrement. There were cuts, bruises, and bites. There were cigarette burns on my thighs and on my breasts, and I had been stabbed. Everything was so hazy to me in that moment. The only thing that was clear was that nothing could ever be the same again. I ran the hottest bath that I could, and I scrubbed my body till it was red raw. And once I got dressed, we decided to tidy up the flat and not speak about it. You see, already I was thinking, well, I'd lied to my parents, I'd met boys, I'd bought alcohol. What did I expect? I'd brought this on myself. This was my fault. And then we went our separate ways. And the following day, we went back to school as if nothing had happened. Except I know now that's not quite true, because what we don't speak about leaks out of us. And it leaked out of me in so many ways. I developed an eating disorder. I had so many fears, phobias, anxieties. I used drugs and alcohol to numb out. But worst of all was what it did to my mind. Whilst I couldn't really still remember many details from that night, It just left me feeling so worthless, dirty, and contaminated. I didn't understand the point to being me or being alive, and one day I swallowed handfuls of pills that I found around the house, hoping to end my life. Clearly, it didn't work. But can you imagine how I felt when I woke up in hospital, not even knowing I'd had my stomach pumped? You can't even kill yourself, I thought. You can't even get that right. What a loser. So from there, they transferred me to a children's psychiatric ward where I would spend 2 or 3 months. But once I got home, my behavior didn't improve. I would say that I rebelled even more, partying hard, becoming promiscuous because I was just too scared to say no. One morning, my mum is waiting for me as I'm sneaking in late. She's so angry. "Don't you realize the danger you're putting yourself in?" she says to me. But I still couldn't find my voice to tell her. So I wrote a note, which I left on my pillow. And when I came home from school, my parents asked me, "Is this true?" "Yes," I replied quietly. So they called my friend, and she said, "No, she's got it wrong. They were nice boys. They just brought us home." Just before my 17th birthday, I went to Israel for a year. And about 4 weeks before the end, I met this guy called Stephen. He was a blonde, blue-eyed Glaswegian. I mean, why wouldn't I fall for a Scot? But he was the first man that I felt safe with, and I knew that I could trust. And over time, with his love, I learned that I was lovable, that I could give love back in return, and I could slowly learn to like myself, maybe even love myself one day. After a few years, he popped the question, and I said yes. Initially, the idea of starting a family terrified me. I thought that giving birth was going to be like being raped again. But my best revenge has been having my 3 gorgeous girls and living my life as best as I possibly can. And I really thought that motherhood had healed me. But Anna, my eldest daughter, turned 13, and out of nowhere, flashbacks, nightmares, memories just came flooding in. I thought I was going mad. So I went back to therapy again, and I asked my therapist to make these pictures stop. You see, for years, it had been like a jack-in-the-box. I'd been stuffing the memories deep down inside of me, but the lid had sprung open now, and I couldn't close it anymore. He kind of laughed at me, and I quickly realized that the way in was going to be my way out. Near to the end of these sessions, he suggested something outrageous to me one day. Perhaps these 2 young men weren't born rapists. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How dare he say that to me? I was so angry. You see, for years, I fantasized about somebody kidnapping the 2 of them, taking them to an empty flat, beating them up, tying them up, raping and torturing them for 4 to 5 hours on end, just like they had done to me. Then they would know that the impact of rape, it doesn't last for one night, it lasts decades. But a seed had been planted, and I needed to understand how could these 2 young men know to be so violent towards another human being? And I remembered something that a good friend said to me years ago, which I never forgot. My friend Anne used to be a midwife, and she told me that she had delivered thousands of babies, and she never once met an evil one. And just like her, I do believe we are all born a blank canvas, but we get conditioned by life. And I wondered, what had these 2 young men seen, heard, or even experienced themselves to make them behave that way with me that day? And somehow, I started to feel compassion in my heart towards them. I mean, if I still held on to all that anger, it would have no impact on them. It would only hurt me and my family. And then I realized I could take it one step further. I could choose to forgive them in order to make peace with my past. Now, I have to be very clear here and say 2 things. 1, I will never forgive the act of rape. And secondly, I am not saying that in order to heal, you need to forgive. This was my path and how I chose to do it. Forgiveness was actually nothing to do with them. I didn't need them standing in front of me to tell me that they were sorry. It was an act of self-love, totally self-empowering, and my key to freedom that cut the cords that limited my growth and tied me to the past. The intense, crippling shame that I felt for years never belonged to me. It always belonged to them. And I am not my body or the things that were done to me. I am so much more than the sum of one night. And I also know that it's not what happens to us in life that is important, but what we do with it that really matters. And if I have a choice in how I respond, then we all have a choice too. And I'd like to leave you with some questions to think about. Is there a hurt, event, or disappointment that you still hold on to? And if you do, what purpose does it serve? And could you, like me, learn to accept the facts for what they are, knowing that they can't be changed, and let it go? Thank you.